Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting comics loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with comics creator Dave McCaig. Dave, thank you for jumping in, joining. And there is a creature from the Black Lagoon over your shoulder. I just want you to know
There
that.
is.
In case you didn't know, he's back there hanging out.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Well, thanks for joining. I usually mention a couple of works that you're known for. I actually taught Superman Birthright in my English 3 class this year. That
Oh,
was our
great.
first read, talking about American literature and things. So that was a wonderful reading experience for them, kind of something out of the ordinary. You've also worked in the worlds of Firepower, The Sacrificers, Arkham Manor, Seventh Sword. I actually was just kind of looking through the range of things you've created, and I could probably spend the next 30 minutes just listing them. I'm pretty sure you've been quite prolific.
Yeah, I think I've colored somewhere north of 20,000 comic pages at this point.
Yeah, 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 that's very
So
impressive. Very
plenty of
impressive.
pages, plenty of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we get to some of your favorite collaborations, experiences, and what you're working on currently, how did you get here? How did you know comics would be the space that you wanted to create in?
I kind of fell into comics. Backstory is that my dad was a commercial artist, and I was always fascinated in what he was doing. Throughout his career, he did things like working as a sketch artist in courtrooms. He did a nationally syndicated Canadian uh, political cartoon. He worked in animation. He worked at television studios making sets and props and graphic design for stations. And he just had a million cool art jobs. And I thought, that seems fun.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll
yeah.
do that. So I went through advertising illustration in college. And at the time when I graduated, that was in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And there were three companies at that time in the world who were coloring comics on computers.
Hmm.
One of them was in Winnipeg, and they hired half of my graduating class of that year to fill desks because they had $65,000 workstations and they needed to pay them off. So
Hmm.
they had 24-hour rotation shifts, working 8 hours at a time on each machine. And so
Wow.
we sweatshopped our way through comic learning, and I got my hands dirty that way. And then by the time the price of computers dropped down to $12,000 4 years later, I think I took out a loan and went off on my own way.
Yeah, cool. Very cool. Yeah, you've seen lots of changes, I'm sure, as the industry has gone on in your career.
Oh yeah, yes, everything going digital has made life significantly easier. It's great.
Yeah, no more running with FedEx packages and all of those kind of things.
No, you don't have to be best friends with your FedEx guy anymore.
That's
Not
right.
that I have a problem with being friends with FedEx guys, but you don't have to hang off their leg and beg and plead them to take your package because it's
Right,
like
right.
4 weeks later, or
It's more
whatever.
of an honest relationship now. It's not
Yeah,
as much a get something out of it kind of relationship. I
I
appreciate
mean,
that.
yeah, I remember working at Digital Chameleon and pages getting finished so late that the guys who were running the company at the time had to like drive to the airport and put the pages onto a chartered plane in order to get them to where they were going in time. Because
Wow.
otherwise, it would have cost the printer or like the publisher, thousands and thousands of dollars to get more print press time. So
Yeah. Thank goodness for email and Zoom and all of the things.
yeah, much
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah. Now, of those 20,000 pages that you've created, I think 20,000 was that the number you said, something like that?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Has there been a set of experiences, a collaboration or two that sort of bubble to the surface as the pinnacle moments, or is that too hard to pin down from
No,
all of
I
the
think that's
creating?
fair. I really enjoyed working on. There's a book I worked on called Low with Craig Ticini, who drew it, and Rick Remender wrote it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I mean, that was a real labor of love because the time I put into that book just didn't. I mean, it's good that I had other paying work because there's no way I could have paid my bills if that was the only job I was working on because those pages took about a page a day.
Yeah.
Normally, as a
Yeah.
colorist, you want to be hitting more like 3 or 4 pages a day if possible.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, yeah. I mean, it was fun, but they were very long, arduous days, but that paid off. I look back fondly on that book. It's still, I think, probably one of my favorite things I've worked on.
Nice, nice.
Things like Northlanders too, even though Brian Wood, who wrote it, is a problematic figure in the comic industry. He did put together good comics about Vikings, which I really enjoyed, and we ended up paired with amazing artists on all of the very short arcs.
Hmm.
And that was always fun because one of the joys of being a colorist is pairing. It's like being in a band. You pair your style with the style of the other guys you're mingling with and try to make something when it comes together that's better than the individual parts. And that's fun to do when you've got extremely different artists that you're working with every few months.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
So those
cool.
stood out. Yeah. And also I've dabbled in animation as well. So I worked on the animated series The Batman, not
Uh-huh,
the
uh-huh,
Batman, not the Batman animated series. This is the one Jeff Betsuda was the art director on in 2003
uh-huh,
or four.
uh-huh.
I can't remember when it came out, but yeah, that was a treat. I had never worked in animation before that, and they made me color supervisor. So I just sort of got thrown into the ocean instead of just getting my feet wet. But
Yeah,
that was fun.
I remember that series well, and I remember that it was very striking in its design.
Yeah, yeah. We tried to go bold and flat,
Hmm. Hmm.
retro and cool. I think it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there was a comic series that spun out of that as well. There was that kind of relationship between animation and comics for a
There
while
was
that I
Batman
guess is still
Strikes.
going on. Uh-huh,
I did
uh-huh.
most of the covers. I drew most of the covers for that. That was another thing where I got myself thrown into the deep end because I color a lot, but I don't draw a lot. And
Hmm. Hmm.
the editor at the time said, "Hey, do you want to draw all the covers for this book?" Sure, I'm not going to say no. If they don't like them, they can fire me. But they didn't fire me, so I mean, somebody liked them, so that's good.
Win-win, win-win.
Right.
Absolutely. Now, what currently has your creative focus?
Well, I'm coloring the entire Walking Dead series
Yeah,
and have been
yeah.
for about 7 years. So it's really funny because normally when you work in comics, you have a very short window between when the comic is drawn and when it goes to press.
Hmm.
But in this case, I had the entire 20-year run series all at once, almost all of it at the time I was starting it. And yeah, Robert Kirkman wants wanted it done really quickly. Um, I'm way ahead of schedule. I started it about 4 years before the first issue hit the stands,
Yeah.
which is
Okay.
unheard of. I'm currently coloring issue 126, and there's like 80 something issues on the stands right now. So I'm a couple years ahead still. So, and he's always shaking his fist at me like, "Give me those pages. You're falling behind." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I technically fell behind, but I'm still 40 issues ahead of schedule." It's hard to take that threat, that shaking fist too seriously. But he wants it, and maybe he has plans for it. I don't know. So yeah,
Yeah,
keeps me on my toes.
nice, nice. And you've also collaborated with him on Firepower, I believe, as well. Is that right?
I did some covers, yeah,
Yep.
but
Hmm.
I'm more than that. I've done a lot of the stuff for Invincible, so I seem to be the Invincible guy now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I did all the key art for season 2 and season 2.5. So when you watch it on Amazon, the artwork that comes up there, I painted the backgrounds and colored the characters for that. And I worked on the Fortnite load screen that came out a few months ago. That
Nice,
was an
nice,
Invincible tie-in. Yeah, so yeah, I keep getting all these fun jobs. Well, yeah, a lot of them through him, which is great. But yeah.
nice. Awesome. Yeah. And I know a lot of folks kind of work in comics, also work in animation, and so that seems to be a wise way to go about the career path as well.
Oh yeah, it's fun because a lot of guys cycle through that, right? A lot of people who work in games want to work in comics, and a lot of people who work in comics want to work in animation, and a lot of people who work in animation want to work in games, and it's just this cycle. So you get
Yeah.
to know a lot of people because people move around. So yeah, it's always smart to keep fingers in different pots, you
Hmm.
know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's more fun. It's just harder to schedule, but
Yeah.
worth it.
Yeah. Now, it's an English teacher question coming your way because I'm
Sure,
recognizing you have the creature from the Black Lagoon. You have ceramic busts. Oh my goodness, there's the Batman
I
up
do.
there. Yeah. So I'm curious about the kind of stories that you kind of vibe with the most, the things that you kind of jam out to when you're creating, or even on the reading side when you're looking for fresh inspiration. That's how you say that.
Oh,
Yes.
my reading side's going to be sad because I don't have a lot of time to read the sorts of things I would actually like to read
Hmm.
anymore.
Hmm.
Um, it's weird working in entertainment because you're doing it for a living. So it's kind of like movies. I used to be a big cinemaphile, and I watch fewer movies than I used to. I tend to do more immersive stuff.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it's 1 in the morning and I'm done my workday because I've had a long day or whatever, I'm not going outside. I want to do something. So I end up going and playing video games.
Hmm. Hmm.
So something with a good story is great. As much fun as it is to just shoot people in Call of Duty or something like that, it's nice to play like a big immersive story. Like I'm going back because the show is on right now. I'm playing Fallout 4 again,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and then
Yeah.
like big, huge, elaborate choose your own adventure style single player games, open
Nice.
sandbox things. I quite like that. As far as books that I listen to though, because that's all I have time to do is listen to books. I find the longest I don't want to say most poorly written, but let's say most dragged out science fiction and fantasy stories I can,
Uh-huh.
so that I
Uh-huh.
can listen to the book and concentrate on my work. And while somebody is blathering on about some recipe for spiced wine or something, I can just concentrate on my work, and doesn't matter if I don't catch everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are door stoppers. Those are great for that. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. They're fantasy and sci-fi books that I feel like you could probably stack up and stand on. So that's really good.
that's what I look for. I look for the longest individual. Uh, like it's got to be like 40 hours long per book, and there's got to be like 5 books. And
Nice.
you gotta see how quickly they get published. They gotta come out like once a year. It's gotta
Hmm.
be like there's a single edit on it. It's like stream of consciousness. It's just like this guy's telling you his pitch for 40 hours without, without really pulling it together. That's what I want in an audiobook, which is sad because I used to be really into reading history books and science books, and you
Hmm.
cannot do that while you're working because then you have to stop and concentrate. I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
there's people who can watch movies in the background while they work, and I don't know how. I don't know how they do that because I just stop and watch.
Yeah, I get that. I would have no idea what was going on in the movie after a while.
Yeah,
Well, by means of a final official question, and I greatly appreciate the time and greatly
sure.
appreciate the conversation. Curious about anything that you'd like to tee up as far as appearances. Yeah, I know you're immersed in the Kirkman universe at the moment, busy with
Right.
that, as well as spaces where people can connect to follow along with what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, as far as other projects I'm working on besides Walking Dead, I'm also doing a book called The Sacrificers with Rick Remender right now
Hmm. Hmm.
and Max Fumera, and that book's awesome. It's so much fun. Uh, uh, I worked with Max and his brother on Lucifer when uh, Vertigo was just winding down and turning into Black Label, and
Hmm.
the whole thing
Hmm.
was falling apart. But man, that was a really satisfying book to work on, and it's nice to pair up with him again on this weird sort of fantasy story. Like, yeah, I don't want to pitch the story because it's one of those things where I don't want to spoil what happens in it. Just pick one up, read it. It's good. The
Hmm.
first trade
Hmm.
paperback came out with the first 6 issues just recently, so that's a good time to jump on. I'm also working on another book. I'm not sure if Rick has announced it yet, but a book with Yannick Paquette and Rick Remender, which
Nice,
is
nice.
another one of these. It's too much work, but it's worth it. Books.
A
Yannick Paquette,
labor of
yeah, Yannick
love.
Paquette and I worked on a book called The Incal Psychoverse
Hmm. Hmm.
before this, and that book was just very time consuming, but it went over well because it got an Eisner nomination. So uh, yeah, but he's great to work with. Just really talented guy. Just
Yeah,
very
for
time
sure.
consuming coloring stuff. Yeah, but so those are the projects I'm working on. I think you asked me something else, and I segued into that instead.
No, that's great. That's great. I was just asking about like appearances, places where
Oh,
people can go online and that sort of thing.
yeah, we're having this discussion on April 21st. I will be
Mhm.
at the Calgary Comic Expo this coming weekend.
Nice, nice.
And after that, I'm not entirely sure. I'll be at Fan Expo Canada for sure. I might be at New York Comic Con and I might be at San Diego Comic Con. We'll see.
Cool. I'll make sure to get this out in time so that
All
people
right.
can check that out.
Great.
All right. Anything that we've missed that you want to make sure to share? Any stories about Superman Birthright for my English 3 students or anything else before we close?
Oh, I have a million Superman Birthright stories. Yeah, I worked on Superman Birthright. Do you mind if I go off on a little segue about Superman Birthright
I
stories?
would love for you to do that by
All
all
right.
means.
Before I started to work on the Batman, the animated series, The Batman,
Hmm,
uh,
hmm.
I went on a hiking trip on the West Coast Trail, which is this big 2 week long hiking trail in British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And I wasn't finished coloring the book. And this is a whole comics are easier to get to publishers story
Hmm,
because I had to
hmm.
bring a janky old laptop with me and I was on a bus on a dirt road and I had to finish coloring a page on a dirt road while it was bouncing around like you imagine it would be in some middle American or South American country or something on a mountain road or something. It was like that.
Hmm, hmm.
So it's bouncing around, and I get to the trailhead town, which had a population of like 300 people or something, and I had to go to the postmaster of the town and beg her to please sell me a CD-ROM and also mail mail this thing for me because it didn't they didn't actually have regular mail pickup at this place. They only went once a week, but she happened to be going to a major city that day after work,
Hmm.
and she offered to store my laptop and drive the package to FedEx for me to make sure that Superman Birthright was able to get into people's hands because I couldn't
Wow.
finish it in time before going on this 2 week trip that I could not postpone because I wasn't going alone. So that was nerve wracking. Another good story about that is in the middle of the run of that series, I had moved to Los Angeles, and Mark Wade and I would go for lunch on Wednesdays at Earth Two, the comic store. We'd pick up our comics and hang out for lunch and talk about the nitty gritty of the book.
Hmm.
And we got to figure out a lot of the effects that happen in the book and figure out why certain things work a certain way. Because he's one of those guys who really likes to get into the let's not just do this because it looks cool. Let's make sure it makes sense,
Hmm, hmm.
like so that it all feels more real. And that was really fun figuring out how his heat vision worked and how his like telescopic vision worked and stuff like this. And we worked all these visual cues out for how it worked. And then Smallville, the TV show that came out around that time, went,
Uh-huh.
oh, they just did all the work for us. And they just whole hand stole all of the effects that we did on that. All the zoom effects and things that were on the panels were the zoom effects they used on the show,
Oh my
which is
goodness.
great. I mean,
Yeah.
that's good. I mean, DC owns it, so great, use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you
But
get a consulting credit or anything like that?
no, 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 no. Just like Mark Wade didn't, I don't think Mark Wade got a consulting credit or a thanks or anything for Man of Steel when that came out, and
Yeah.
that stole liberally from Superman Birthright.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
They need to get better with those credits for sure.
yeah, yeah. It's hard because you work for hire.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an argument for both sides, and I certainly don't want to dissuade creators from chasing after their due.
Hmm.
But you work for hire. You're working on somebody else's story. It's nice to get credit, and if you create characters and things, that you should get recognized and financially compensated. But if you've got a Superman story with existing characters, I don't. Yeah, that's a tricky one for me. But
Sure,
I
I get
I
that.
obviously I'm gonna try to come out in support of creators because creators do not get a very big piece of the pie.
Hmm,
So
hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I've got yeah, Superman Birthright. That was a really fun project to work on because it was pretty crazy. Moving in the middle of doing it and getting to work on it right there with Mark Waid was pretty great.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And I certainly enjoy going through it and kind of getting to surprise my students with, hey, we're going to look at a comic to talk about American history as well. So,
Another quick little Easter egg that's in there
mhm.
when they're in Lex Luthor's. I can't remember the exact page or anything. I think it's 20 years. I think the book's 20 years old now.
Yeah,
Might
yeah,
be,
it's been around a bit.
might be. But when Lex Luthor is in his lab, he's got like some scientific information on his screen,
Uh-huh.
and that is the histogram or something for kryptonite. Like it's actually the thing for krypton gas. So I thought that was a little Easter egg for people.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Love it. Love the details, love the work. Um, Anything that we've missed that you want to share before we close?
I don't think so.
All
It,
right.
anything you wanted to add or
I,
ask?
I'm just sending appreciation, and I appreciate the stories as well. And those are things that I can now point out to my students when we're reading it again. So much appreciated. And Dave, glad to have you back anytime to talk about projects as they're coming to be.
Great. It was great being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks.